get appropriately ruffled. Hello friends. Is this the video I planned to make? No. Is this the video I told you I was making? Also no. Is it, however, the video you're getting? Yes. So you want to make a tunic. Maybe you're going to a Ren fair. Maybe you have a cosplay or some other kind of fantasy costume. Maybe you've just booked your first LARP and they very helpfully said, there's not really a costume brief, just wear a tunic. That thing that all modern people just have in their wardrobe. And you've gone, okay, fine, how hard can tunics be? They made them in like the medieval period. And you've ended up with some diagrams that look kind of like this, and it's a little bit intimidating and scary, and maybe this is your first sewing project, or maybe you just don't have a lot of time and flat felling 18 seams is not your idea of a good time. Well, my friends, you are in luck, because with one piece of fabric, no patterns, limited measuring, and if you're real nasty, only 2 seams, can also hem it. There's extras if you want. We're going to do a lined version too. Doesn't matter. With only these things, you too can make a tunic. Let's get started. Please excuse the awkward angle. Measurements. You only actually need 2 measurements for this. One is the length and the other is how big around you want it to be. Now, length is easy. You want to find the top of your shoulder, wherever it is, measure down however far you want to go. Instinctively, you're going to be like, ah yes, top of tape measure at shoulder, measure down. That's really hard, especially if you're doing a longer tunic, because as you bend down to see the numbers, that measurement's going to change. It is much easier. I think I can probably just clip this to me actually. I don't think it's going to get in the way too much. Turn your tape measure the other way up, sling it over your shoulder, and nudge the bottom. You can't see this, but just move the bottom down to wherever you want your tunic to go. That's a silly short tunic, but okay. And then you're feeling for this muscle here, the one that if you raise your shoulder sticks out, that one. That's where you're measuring from. Whatever this is your measurement. There's no bending down, there's no getting skewed. That's how you measure the length that you want. I don't want that length, that's silly short. So we're aiming for about 1 meter. Your second measurement is the measurement around the chest. Now, again, you're going to be like, ah yes, I know how to measure my chest. We go like this around the widest, make sure you don't hit the microphone. We go like this around the widest part of the chest. You keep 2 fingers tucked in to accommodate for the fact that you need to, you know, breathe, and then you add ease or whatever. So yes, this is your chest measurement, and yes, you might get an okay kind of idea about what you're aiming for. You know, I have a 31-inch chest, it's 32 on this because I'm wearing several layers of clothing, and then I might go, I want to add like 2 inches of ease, so that would be a 34, and so you end up with a loop like this, and then you have to get that. It's gonna have to go over your head. This is not gonna be a stretch garment unless you are making it a stretch garment. I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be a woven fabric with no give. It's gonna have no closures or openings. You need to be able to fit it like this, not like this, like this. Now, if you are a different shape to me, this might be fine, because it might be that between your bust and not having very big shoulders, those measurements are actually kind of okay. They're kind of fine. It's not an issue. I, however, am very thin, don't really have a bust, and my shoulders are broad. So that's how I take the measurement. I don't add any extra ease to this, but this way I know for certain it's going over my shoulders. 39. I think that's about right. It's going to be loose fitting, you're going to belt it, and we're going to do a test one on cheap fabric with you along for the ride, so we'll see if it works. So the measurements I've got right now are, oh, I've done the British thing again, hang on. 1 meter or 39.5 inches-ish for the length, and 39 inches for the chest measurement. That feels good. I feel good about that. We're going to start with that. Okay, so for our first one, we're doing extremely cheap fabric. This is actually a jersey, but we're going to pretend that it's not. Just because I've said this is easy doesn't mean you don't do a mock-up. This is our mock-up. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to measure down from the edge of the fabric the length that you want. So that is 1 meter. This would actually, we have the technology. This is the width of the fabric along the body, and the self edge is going up and down. So I'm going to measure along the self edge up to the length that I want, which is 1 meter, and at that point is where I'm going to fold it. So for the sake of the width of the fabric and the width of my table, what I've got here, ignore this excess. I'm not cutting it off because I want what's left over to be in one piece as much as possible. This is the end of the fabric. I've measured up the length from my shoulder to where I want the hem to be. You should probably add add a little bit more for seam allowance, but this is very fast and loose. So this folds at the top of your shoulder. I've then folded it in half down the middle, so the selve edges are all up this end. This is your center front / center back. Over there is your wrist edges. So your body's gonna go down here and your sleeves are gonna go out there. And because I care about producing a clear tutorial so much, I'm gonna be doing this in Sharpie. So your first question is going to be, how big do the sleeves need to be? I didn't have you measure your arms. There's a reason for that. How big your sleeve is going to be is going to depend on a whole bunch of factors, like what style do you want? How do you want this to fit? What's the goal here? What are we looking for? There is, of course, also a super easy way of making sure you get the proportions on all of this right, and that is put a piece of clothing you already own on it. So in an ideal situation, you would have like a t-shirt or something, fold it in half, lay it on this fold here, and you know where you're measuring to. I don't have that, but I do have my trusty Tudor kirtle pattern, which will do for about here is where I want my sleeve to begin. So measurement number 1, chest measurement. My extended chest measurement I came up with was 38 inches. So we divide that by 4 because we're dealing with a quarter of it right here. And now you've asked me to do maths. So we're gonna line up with that mark. There are better ways than Sharpie, okay? Use a pin, use chalk. I'm using a Sharpie, and we will actually bump that up to 10 inches because I'm gonna want some seam allowance. For this, I want narrow sleeve, so which actually means it's gonna be narrow around the wrist and it's going to flare out as it comes towards my body. That's very comfortable. It works for most things. You're doing an all-in-one sleeve. You're never going to get the kind of range of mobility that you're going to get with a fitted sleeve. So make the arm connection part as big as you can. Trust me. The most important thing is that this has to go over my hands. So about there. Yep. Happy with that. I'm literally using the widest part of my hand as the measurement. And then we're gonna aim towards that dot. I'm gonna draw in a line there. I'm stopping a little bit short because we're gonna be slightly fancy about this. You can do anything you want. You can literally have a right angle. It'll be a bit annoying. You can freehand a curve. I hate freehanding curves, so I'm gonna cheat because I've got one of these. There, I'm pretty happy with that. You should take a lot more effort and time than I have to make sure that your fabric is all laying neatly. It will affect the final garment, but given that, you know, we don't care. Right, so we've got a sleeve. Next thing we need is a hem. Now, the temptation is going to be, aha, I'll just extend this line out until it reaches the end. No, we don't do that. If your side seams and your hem meets and comes to a point, you will have points at the edge of your tunic. This might be what you want, but 9 times out of 10 it isn't. You want a nice straight hem, and you do that by making the bottom of the garment a curve. So this fabric's great because it's got stripes. We're going to go across from where the armhole starts, measure down to see what we're doing. 73 centimeters. You're just going to have to deal with me switching back and forth between inches and centimeters. You take whatever that measurement is in your local measurement of choice, fuss over the fabric a bit more because you really not done a good job here, and then you measure outwards from that point with as much flare as you want. Now I'm going to go over here. 73 here. Oh, I've proper screwed up this curve. I tried to be too clever. I tried to use the French curve. Didn't work. Just freehand it. So you can see it's not up by much, but it is a sort of 4 inches. And then what you've got to make sure you do is at the bottom of this line, square it off so it's a right angle. That corner needs to be a right angle, otherwise your pieces won't line up. So now we only have one more thing to do, and that is the neckline. Genuinely, I think the best suggestion is to not try and draft in the neckline at all. Cut this out, sew up the side seams, cut very small hole, try and get it over your head. If it doesn't work, make it bigger. Remember that your neck hole will be deeper in the front than it is in the back, usually. I like to live dangerously, and again, I have this to hand, so I'm going to say that I actually want a V on this one, and on the inner fabric, it'll be less. Now we cut this out. Gone. So for the neckline, you can see I've opened it up and refolded it along the center front and center back. So this is the sleeve, this is going to be the back, this is going to be the front. You've got the V that I've sketched in. I now need to add a back neckline. That feels about right. Actually, wait, this is me we're talking about. Oh yeah, it's going to be like here. Your mileage may vary. I have a very forward neck. Maybe just round that a little bit. Yeah. In case you hadn't guessed, the basic principle, figuring out the shape of sleeves you want, how much flare you want, what kind of neckline you want, is try it and see. And voila, we have a neckline. Then all we really have to do is match up the side seams and, well, it's a knit. I'm probably just going to stick it through an overlocker. So I'm not confident I explained that very well, so we're going to do it again on paper. This is your fabric. These edges are the selve edges, this is the length of the fabric, this is the width of the fabric, cut edges. Depending on the width of your fabric is how long your sleeves are going to be. So if you have 150 wide fabric, like I have for most of these, you've probably got long sleeves. If it's 115 or less, you may only have half-length sleeves or short sleeves. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to measure down the selve edge how long you want your length to be. So that is the measurement from the top of your shoulder to the length of your tunic. And you're going to fold your fabric in half at that mark. I'm just doing it exactly in half for ease. And to be honest, you can just do that too. Next, what you want to do is you want to fold it in half long ways. So the fold will be your center front and center back, and your sleeve edges will be these ends here. One fold lengthways and one fold widthways. Again, this is your center front and center back. This is where your neck hole will be. This is where the cuffs of your sleeves will be. At this point, I normally grab a t-shirt or a pattern that I know I like to figure out how far down I want my armpit to hit. You can also measure this on the body. I just find it really unreliable for some reason. You're going to go down a ways and then you're going to measure in 1/4 of your chest measurement. And that's your extended chest measurement with ease, so it fits over your shoulders, not the neck around your rib cage. We're going to put a dot there. Then you figure out how big you want your sleeves to be. If I want a close fitting cuff, I use my hand as a guide, and you taper it out towards where your underarm is. Then you go straight across this line. You measure down however long you want. We're going to go 8.5, and that is what you use to measure the flare outwards. 8.5. You make sure this is a right angle. You probably use a ruler for that bit. And then you take off a little bit for the neck hole. I really do recommend, if you don't already have a neck hole shape in mind, make the smallest hole you can, try it on. If it doesn't go over your head, make it a little bit bigger, make it a little bit bigger, make it a little bit bigger. Fractions at a time. It's really easy to make neck holes way too big. And then we just cut that out. And when you unfold, you'll have a piece of fabric that looks like this. You're going to sew along here and along here, and you're going to finish the hem, the cuffs, and the neckline, and you've got a tunic. So at this point in proceedings, if you're anything like me, you probably have two questions. The first question is this historically accurate? Not to Europe. See, the thing is, you do get the in one piece over the shoulder construction in a lot of historical garments. From Asia, you're going to see garments with the front, back, and sleeves cut in one continuous piece. As far as I can tell, this is the basic construction method for jogori in Korean hanbok. It's also something I've seen in hanfu and other Chinese regional costumes. costumes. It's also kind of a thing in kimono. Kimono have their own thing going on that's slightly different, but we only really see this idea coming into the West in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it's coming from imported garments that are being traded down the Silk routes from China, Korea, Central Asia, India. I don't know anything about Indian clothing, and so they're ending up in Europe and North America at around this time. So yes, it's kind of historically accurate, but probably not to European-inspired Renaissance plus fantasy in the way that you might be using them for a LARP game. The other question you probably have is this actually the easiest tunic possible? And I have an admission to make, no it's not. The easiest tunic possible is a chiton, the staple garment of ancient Greece, which is a sheet and 2 safety pins. You can make it a bit more complex than that, you can dress it up, you can do extras, but it's a sheet and 2 safety pins, and I'm not joking about the safety pins. Ancient Greece had safety pins. They're called fibula. They're actually really beautiful. You can get replica ones, which I highly recommend. They're great. So if you're going to your first ever LARP and you're like, I can't sew at all, genuinely, I think it's a good option for throwing on over some existing, probably cold weather appropriate clothes. There is also a next step up from that, which is, I believe, 1st century Roman. I also believe it's called a tunica, but the Romans were around for a while, so tunica might span a few garments. I'm not a classicist, and that is a sheet with a hole in it for your head. Again, completely respectable historical garment. It's always super tempting to overcomplicate things and plan something really ambitious, but I'm kind of hoping by opening up more incredibly basic options, there's just going to be a bit more awareness of the really easy shortcuts you can take if you want our costume right now, very easily, very cheaply. I don't know how to sew. Obviously I do know how to sew, but if you don't know how to sew, or your mate doesn't know how to sew and isn't going to fit your kit. The other really nice thing about the chiton and the tunica is that they are incredibly adjustable size-wise. Yeah, you probably shouldn't be wearing them as your main or only garment, and yes, they are not flattering, but if all you have is a pair of jeans and a fleece, maybe you can look kind of historical-ish for this one game, your first game, your 10th game. And the nice thing about the tunica and the chiton as well is that when you do feel like you're ready to tackle something a bit more complicated, you can just turn that piece of fabric into one of these. One of the other variations you can do on this is obviously, what's the difference between a coat and a tunic? A coat is cut up the front, and you can literally just cut up the front if that's what you want, but in this case I'm going to show you how to do a front extension. Exactly the same as before. Battle with the fabric that does not want to behave itself at all. Honestly, when the trickiest part of the process is laying out the fabric. So for this one, I'm going to use the example of using a shirt that you know fits you. I'm not really using this for the width. We know the width that we want from the measurement that we took. Just using it to get how deep the armhole needs to be, which I think is about there. And I want this to be nice, so I'm actually using, you know, chalk and not Sharpie. So fold here, that's my underarm mark. Got to decide what I want to do with the sleeves. I think what I want to do with the sleeves is something a bit more dramatic. I think I'm actually going to do a pendant sleeve. Here feels good. Going to keep that square and have a curve. Then somewhere up about here, have a curve. And we're going to have to scooch everything up because I'm making this one long. Straight across the bottom of the armhole. I'm going to measure down the front, and we're going to flare this as much as possible. Cool, we have a shape. Now we're just going to cut that out. Then obviously we need to turn this into a coat, so I am going to cut through one layer of the fabric straight up this fold. And finally we'll just give it a little neckline. So next what we're going to do is add the front extensions. So we're going to get the leftover fabric. It's not a lot, but it's something. Actually going to just overlap this slightly. If you're being more precise, that's going to be your seam allowance that you're overlapping by. I fully intend to just overlock this, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. And again, you are measuring down from where it's going to start, which I'm going to start my front extension literally from the neckline, which means it is longer than my ruler, which is great. So we're doing this the slightly fiddly way. Cool, almost exactly 46 inches. And then in exactly the same way as you did the hem, you're just going to swing out to wherever you need to be. And then because I'm reasonably confident that it's symmetrical enough, I'm not actually going to do the same thing again, I'm just going to flip this one. There is no version of this that doesn't show off how hilariously cramped my workroom is. But I have an entire room in which to do this, so like, who cares? If you didn't already know, this overlocker was paid for in part by my Ko-fi supporters. Many thanks to all of my Ko-fi supporters. The return on investment there seems kind of off to me, but I sure as heck appreciate it. So my order of operations is going to sound a bit weird. I'm going to finish the ends of the sleeves, add the front extensions, because that's easier to do when it's flat, do up the side seams, and then finish the hem and the front. I think that will be okay. Let's just do it. Hello. So I've got one more tunic project for you, and this one is, I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to say it's complicated. It takes a minute to get your head around, so just bear with. We're gonna make a lined one. So first things first, I have made another tunic out of this flocked lame. Fun fact, if you cut your sleeves completely straight, they end up looking slightly flared because your arm tapers towards the hand and the sleeve doesn't. It's an optical illusion. I've made that, and I've also made the lining, exact same pattern. I've sewn up the side seams on both of them. I've pressed them open. I'm going to go through how we attach them together. First thing, if we just sew them together as is, the lining and the outer fabric will meet exactly at the edge. And I think I'm okay with that on the sleeves, but it's not the effect that I want on the bottom hem. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the lining shorter, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. Could I measure this? Yes, of course I could. Am I going to? No, because it's 10 p.m. and these were supposed to be quick projects. So now I've done that and the lining is inside out. We're going to get the outer tunic back and we're going to stuff the outer tunic inside the lining, which is inside out, so the right side of each fabric is together. We'll make them nice because the last thing you want is to get them twisted at this point. We're going to match up the side seams and we're just going to pull the new shorter hem down to meet the hem of the outer. Before I go any further, I should mention you could put the lining inside the outer, wrong sides together, turn the seam allowances inward and either hand sew it shut, which would be very historical, or just top stitch it and completely avoid all the non-Euclidean geometry I'm about to do. You can do that, but my way's cooler. So first things first, we're going to sew this. So you've sewn your hem, and so now you have the outer inside the lining sewn together only at the hem. That's important, only the hem. Don't do anything else yet. Next, we need to get it into the configuration it's going to be in for the rest of its life. You can technically use any opening, but the neck hole's the biggest one. So you're going to dive in and pull the outer out, and then again I just go in through the neck opening, but you can do this anyway, it doesn't matter at this point, and you're going to pull the lining to the inside. We've got our hem, which for reasons I cannot adequately explain, doesn't seem to have the same fold under that I thought it would. I probably screwed up the measuring because it's 10 o'clock at night. I should also point out at this stage of proceedings that if you are going to do the fold under outer hem, by cutting off the bottom of the lining, you are actually making it narrower, so you will either have to slightly gather the outer or just bring the side seams in by a little bit. It's late. Aren't you glad I'm showing you how to do something really complicated late at night? So your problem now is the sleeves. If you turned this inside out and sewed the sleeve holes, you wouldn't be able to turn it right way out again. It just wouldn't be possible. So conventional wisdom is that you can't therefore do these by machine. You can. It's just real weird. What you're going to do is you're going to dive in. So, and you're going between the outer and the lining, and you're going to go down the sleeve. Do not, at this stage, get them twisted. That would be bad. So you're going to grab the edge of the outer. You're going to grab the edge of the lining. Put them together. That is what your seam will look like when you are done. And you're going to pull them out through here. And then, this is the important bit, you are going to sew half of the arm opening. Only half. No more, no less. You have a little bit of wiggle room, but half. So we've sewn our half, right side to right side. This is where the witchcraft starts to happen. Post it back. Half of your armhole is nicely finished. The other half, not so much. Next step, very important. You're going back in through the neckline. We went this side before. We are now going the other side of the lining because we're coming out this side of the armhole. Grab the outer, grab the lining, pull them back through, and now you sew the other half. We have sewn the other half of the armhole. We now have a sleeve outer and a sleeve lining that are completely attached to the cuff. Under normal circumstances, this would now mean that you couldn't turn the whole garment right side out. But not this day. All the way around, fully finished cuff, finished hem, still intact. All you gotta do now is do the other one. Now at this point, I would love to tell you that there's an equally clever and straightforward way of doing the neckline. And maybe there is, but I don't know it. Literally, I've just top stitched them together. I'm either gonna bind it or I'm gonna turn it to the inside and cover it with some ribbon. Probably gonna do that by hand. Maybe not tonight. Boy, am I tired. I also need to iron this a lot. But you don't need to see that, which means I think the next time we're going to touch base is in the reveal. Well, there we go. One basic principle done 3 ways with varying degrees of success, but I hope you agree that the general principle is sound, and I'll be honest, the stripy top took me maybe an hour total. The robe a little bit longer, this lined one a little bit longer. I hope you can agree these are insanely quick projects. So if you're going to your first ever game or your 5th ever game, or you just need an extra base layer for this one-off character you're never going to play again, or even you just don't feel like sewing a lot for this particular event, this is a really great option, and I think it's an amazing tool to have in your skill set. There's also loads of other variations I'm sure you could come up with to make it different in different ways. I've only shown off 3 of them. A big shout out goes to Burnley and Trowbridge. I pattern tested their wrapping gown pattern, and while I'd done tunics like this before, I'd always traced out one side and then tried to mirror it, or try to do it flat with like a center back seam. The technique of folding the fabric in half and in half again was something that I picked up from that pattern and makes this way easier. If you do end up making one of these, please tag me or put it somewhere so I can see it. I would love that. I love seeing other people's kit, and it's especially exciting when it's something that it feels like we've worked on together. And with very little more to say, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to keep the YouTube gods happy. Follow me on Instagram if you'd like to see pictures of my cat and memes and occasional spicy reels. Down in the description box you can find a link to my Ko-fi page where you can make a one-off or reoccurring donation to support this channel, and the urge I keep repressing to just buy a second sewing machine purely to do buttonholes with. Ko-fi supporters get early access to all of my videos and lifetime access to things like live streams, which eventually get unlisted from the channel. Dream big, and I'll see you next time.